Hey everybody, it's PJ from .FL and Karma Airguns, and you're watching this video today most likely because you're either trying to do some maintenance on your Red Panda that involves some part swaps or upgrades or something along those lines, or you're moving from a 2024 spec Red Panda to a 2025 spec Red Panda. So this is what I'd throw out to you. Before you do any wrenching on your airgun, please watch all of the videos. There is kind of a sequence to them, and what we want to make sure that you're absolutely understanding is how important it is to degas your airgun before you do any of the part removal that we're talking about in this series of airguns. If your airgun is under pressure, you run the risk of damaging the airgun and possibly injuring yourself or someone else. So if you have questions about how to degas the airgun, I've already done it on the gun that we're going to be working with. Go back to the first video. That's the one where we talk about the degassing procedure. So make sure you've checked that out. Now on to the show. So when you have the rear end of your Panda off, there is one thing I would like you to check. I want you to pull the 4 screws that you just took out. I'll try and get this to zoom in on my hand and not my face. So you see how they're 2 different lengths? If your screws are 2 different lengths, and by the way, the top ones are likely to be longer than the bottom ones, what I want you to do is go to your hardware store. You're going to grab an M4x16. You don't need a whole box, okay? But it's an M4x16. Buy 2 of those. You can get fancy stainless ones if you want, doesn't matter to me. But replace the short screws with the longer screw. It's gonna give you more purchase on the inside of that back bottom section and ultimately give you a stronger, more long-lasting airgun. So you may wanna replace that screw. Again, M4 by 16. In the event that you want to adjust the rear first regulator on your Red Panda, there are a couple of steps that you need to pay attention to get at it. Now, as of the filming of this video, and of course, you know, stuff on the internet lasts forever, and who knows what design changes or setup changes we might make. But as of today, if you have a slug version of one of our air guns, the rear regulator is likely to be completely open. So if you wanted to convert it to a pellet version and wanted to reset that regulator, this information might be of some use to you. Similarly, if you bought a pellet version and want to open the rear regulator, because you're going to be tuning it for slugs, these instructions should help you out. So first thing we have to do is remove the cheek rest. There are 6 screws holding the cheek rest on. This is a 2.5 millimeter Allen. And there is an official, I guess I'd say right and wrong way for this to go on. The longer slope, shorter slope. The longer slope is supposed to go on the rear. The shorter slope is supposed to go towards the front of the gun. But that just comes off. And then we have 2 screws up here. And these are 3 millimeter hex. And that allows this whole rail unit to just lift off. Now this is keyed, if you look at the bottom. So one side goes there, one side goes there. Because it's keyed, it's unlikely that you'll put it back together the wrong way. but you might want to make note of that. Then we're going to use the thumb screws. These screws are normally used to make buttstock adjustments. We're just going to pull the whole rear buttstock off. And set that aside. And now we have these two caps. So we're going to take, these are 2.5. Nope, 3s, sorry. Loosen those. And then there is one final grub screw right here. And that's a 4. There's also a little puck in there. You want to just make sure that's in good shape. So what we have to do now is pull this off the tank. It does require just a little bit of pressure. This is all part of the air handling system, so there are O-rings holding everything in place. And so now I've got that off. You can see this one's got a little extra oil, so I'd probably clean that up before I put it back together. And our regulator lives right in here. So we have to unthread. This is just standard righty-tighty, or in our case, lefty-loosey. Get this off. It gets a little bit easier as you get it going. We are really in the belly of the beast now, folks. So here we have, there you go. Here we have the regulator. So I'm going to bring you just a little bit in closer so that we can see how this adjustment works. So I'm going to do whatever I can to keep my fat fingers out of the way so you can actually see what I'm doing. But the way that this regulator is adjusted is there's a locking collar around here, and that gets loosened, and then the regulator itself actually gets adjusted with a 5mm Allen. And if you notice, there's a white dot here and a white dot there, and that is a guideline to where it's set from the factory. Typically that's around 2800 psi. What we're going to do in this case, in order to prepare this for building into a slug configuration, is we're going to bypass this regulator by backing this all the way out. So this is only necessary if you're going from pellet to slug, but if you're going from slug to pellet, you might not, but you may want to reset it. So if you're going to do this, my advice is when we do back this out, we're going to count the turns so you know about where to go. You're going to need a pencil and a paper for that, and you're going to have to write it down somewhere where you're not going to lose it. So first, I'm going to put this on here. Then we're going to put the Allen wrench in there so that when we loosen this, loosen that ring, okay? Now, this can be adjusted. So I'm going to turn this out. Start with the line up, and I'm going to count my turns. So 1, 2, I'm going to say like 2 1/4. And what I want to do is I want to get this so that the body of the regulator, that silver disc, is about even with the lip of the locking ring. So I want those to be about even. And then you can take the 18 millimeter and I can close that back up. Make sure everything stays exactly where I want it. So I'm pulling this way towards me on one wrench and towards you on this wrench. So it's tightening up like that. And what I'm left with is the regulator flush with the front of that cap. And it was about 2 1/4 turns to do that. So if I wanted to put it back, I could loosen that, roll it in 2 1/4 turns, tighten it back down, reassemble the whole gun, add air, then I'd be able to check right here what that regulator pressure is. But there's no practical way to check the regulator pressure without reassembling the gun completely and then filling it with air. So it is kind of a challenging regulator to adjust. It's really not meant to be adjusted, but now you know how to bypass it if you want to. To put the whole thing back together, we basically just have to retrace our steps. So I've got this adjusted or opened. I can screw on this, and I should make note of all this. We're dealing with stuff that's O-ring related, right? And if you're not careful taking things off and putting them back on, it's entirely possible that you would nick an O-ring. So it is worth me putting my reading glasses on and taking a peek at all of the O-rings that we just worked around. Make sure that they are properly lubed, and this one is. And then going ahead and carefully reattaching without doing anything silly like cross-threading, which if you're not careful, you could certainly do. Note that if you put a lot of downward pressure on this while you're reinstalling it, those threads are going to kind of bind up on you, so you don't want to do that. Then we want to make sure that's tight at the bottom. If you remembered, I noticed that this part was a little wetter than it needed to be. So I'm going to give that and these surfaces a little wipe down. And I'm going to make sure I inspect these O-rings so that I'm sure they're all good. And I'm going to use a little bit of pure silicone grease. Get a focus there. There we go. You don't need to gob on grease. It's not going to make it better. Just need a little bit on there so that they go on smooth and stay nice and airtight. Once those O-rings are lubed, you can go ahead and nice and easy pop that on. You'll hear 2 clicks as it goes on. I'm going to take this grub screw that we took out from there, put that back in. And by the way, this grub screw isn't actually holding anything together so much as it's just part of the air seal and a final check that there's no air in there before you start taking things apart. What actually holds this assembly onto the tanks are these screws. So we want to make sure they're nice and clean and they go on and are seated properly. most importantly, not cross-threaded. Look how easy those go in. Remember, this is a 3mm to get this finally tightened down. Once that's in place, you can go back to this top rail. Remember, it's keyed, so it really only goes on one way. If you try to put it on the other way, it won't fit in the back. It'll be all wonky on you. So really easy to do this one right. And we've got these 2 machine screws that each pop in. They're both the same, so you can't get them switched up. Wrong one. Once we have that on, we can replace the cheek riser, and then it's a simple matter of getting these 6 screws back in. When that's done, the buttstock can go back on. And then we have our rear end reassembled. Rear end reassembled. In case nobody ever showed you how to adjust the cheek riser on this, you do have those 6 screws that we just took out and then put back in. With those loosened, you can then move this up and down to whatever position, angle, call it configuration that you want, and then tighten them down. As far as adjustments on the back end of the buttstock, for length of pull, you have 3 thumb screws, and that allows you to open or close. You get almost an inch of adjustment, and then it's a simple matter of tightening those down when you get to the desired length of pull. And for the butt pad itself, you actually have the ability to raise or lower, and then again, using the thumb screws, just tighten those down when you get to the right spot. And basically, you have a butt pad that allows you to tailor the rifle exactly to your size, which is what we want for precision shooting. On to the next video.